Welcome to the Red Raven UAS podcast.
And welcome back.
And today we're tackling what I think is the single biggest hurdle for so many people in this industry.
Oh, yeah.
It's 2026. Drones are everywhere. Construction, public safety, real estate, you name it.
It's fully arrived.
And you might have the best drone, you might have amazing flying skills, but there is always that final boss standing in your way.
The FAA Part 107 exam.
Exactly.
It really is the gatekeeper. And, at Red Raven, we specialize in training, consulting, and compliance. So helping agencies and individuals get certified is a huge part of what we do every single day.
So that's the mission for today's deep dive.
Right. We want to demystify this test. We're going to kill the anxiety around it and give you a study strategy that actually works.
Without needing a degree in aerospace engineering first.
Exactly.
I think that's the biggest fear. People see federal exam, they see aviation, and they panic.
Yeah, they do.
So let's start with the absolute basics, the reality check. When we talk about the Part 107 exam, is this a flight test?
No.
Do I have to go out to a field and fly perfect figure eights for an FAA inspector?
Not at all. Put that fear to rest right now. It is purely a knowledge test.
Okay.
Think of it as the driver's license of the sky, but it's only the written part of the test.
So you never actually touch a drone.
You do not touch a drone. You don't bring your drone. The FAA, for this test, doesn't care if you can fly a perfect circle. They just care that you understand the rules of the road so you don't cause a disaster.
So it's risk management.
Precisely. It's about making sure you don't run into a Cessna or, crash into a crowd.
And who is this for, just to be crystal clear?
It's for anyone flying for work, for any commercial purpose.
So even if I'm just a realtor taking photos of one listing?
Yep. If there's any business intent involved, even if money hasn't changed hands yet, you need the certificate. Flying for fun in your backyard is different, but the second business is involved.
You need the Part 107.
You need the Part 107.
And the logistics, how does it actually work?
Okay, so it's taken in person at a PSI testing center.
A proctored environment.
Right. Cameras, you put your phone in a locker, the whole thing. It's 60 multiple choice questions and you get 2 hours.
And the passing score is 70%.
70%, which means you need to get 42 questions right.
Okay, that feels doable. So let's get into the meat of it. What is actually on this test in 2026? I know things have changed.
They have. The FAA breaks it down into 5 main areas: regulations, airspace, weather, loading and performance, and operations.
Let's start with regulations. That's where the new stuff is, right?
Yeah, that's where the biggest updates are. I mean, you have the basics that haven't changed. Fly below 400 feet above ground level, under 100 miles per hour, and the drone has to be less than 55 pounds.
Standard stuff. But what about, say, a remote ID? We hear about that constantly.
Right. So for 2026, remote ID is fully mandatory. It's not optional anymore.
And that's basically a digital license plate for your drone.
It's a perfect analogy.
Huh.
It broadcasts your drone's location and your location as the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
The test will ask you about it. It wants to know that you understand that compliance is your responsibility.
Not the manufacturers.
Not the manufacturers.
Okay, and what about night operations? I feel like I remember a time when you needed a special waiver for that, and it took months.
You did, and it did. That's the other huge change. That waiver requirement is gone.
Really?
Yes. In 2026, you can fly at night, but you have to have 2 things. First, anti-collision lights on your drone that are visible for 3 statute miles.
Not just some little LED, a real strobe.
And second, you have to have completed the training for night operations, which is now part of the initial test.
Okay, so that's regulations. Now for the one that scares everyone. Airspace.
Like Call of the Beast.
I've seen the charts. They look like a bowl of spaghetti just exploded on a map.
That is a very accurate description. And it's, hands down, the area where most people fail.
Why is it so hard?
Because you have to learn to see an invisible 3D map in the sky. It's divided into zones, classes B, C, D, E, and G. Controlled versus uncontrolled.
And the test gives you one of these maps to read.
Yes. You get a physical book, the testing supplement, and inside are these sectional charts. They'll point to a spot on the map and ask you, what class of airspace is this at 500 feet?
And you have to know how to decode all the colors and lines and numbers to answer that.
Exactly. You have to be able to tell me if an airport has a control tower just by whether the symbol is blue or magenta. You have to know the floor and the ceiling of the airspace just by looking at the chart.
It's not intuitive at all.
Not like reading Google Maps, no. You're dealing with altitudes and invisible shelves of airspace. It takes practice.
All right, let's move to weather. I think this is another one where people ask why, I'm flying at 200 feet for 20 minutes. Why do I need to be a mini meteorologist?
All about safety with manned aircraft.
Yeah.
The test wants you to know visibility requirements.
Mm.
You need at least 3 statute miles of visibility to fly. And you need to know cloud clearance rules. You have to stay 500 feet below any clouds and 2,000 feet away from them horizontally.
And why is that so specific?
Because a medical helicopter or a crop duster could pop out of that cloud layer at any moment. They are not looking for a tiny drone. If you're right up against the clouds, they will hit you before they ever see you.
That makes sense. And this involves reading those coded reports. METARs.
Yes, METARs and TAF, they're standard aviation weather reports. And to the untrained eye, they look like absolute gibberish.
It looks like a complex Wi-Fi password.
It really does. But you'll get a line of code on the test, and you have to be able to look at it and say, okay, the wind is from 110 degrees at 12 knots, gusting to 18 knots. If you can't decode that, you're just giving away easy points.
Right. Okay, so I've got regulations, the beast that is airspace, and weather. What's next?
Loading and performance. This is more straightforward. It's basically about drone physics.
So if I strap a heavy camera to my drone,
What happens? It changes the center of gravity. It might become unstable. It'll use more battery. The test also covers something called density altitude.
that sounds like a term I definitely forgot from high school science.
It's simpler than it sounds. It just means that on a hot day or at a high elevation like in Denver, the air is thinner.
And thin air means?
Your propellers have less to bite into. Your drone will feel sluggish, it will climb slower, and it will take longer to stop. The test wants you to know that your drone's performance changes with the weather and altitude.
That's a practical thing to know. And the last one was operations.
Right. This is about professionalism on the job. Things like crew resource management, how you communicate with a visual observer. It also covers radio communications, so knowing the phonetic alphabet. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie.
Got it. Okay, so that's the landscape. Now let's talk about the hard part. Why do people fail this thing?
It's usually not because the material is impossible. It's the way they studied.
What's the biggest mistake?
Trying to memorize questions instead of understanding the concepts. People will use a flashcard app and just memorize that the answer to a question is C.
But then the test changes the variables.
Exactly. The FAA will change the wind speed or the altitude of the tower in the question. If you only memorize the answer and not the how and the why, you're completely stuck.
Are there specific traps that people always fall for?
Oh, absolutely. The classic one is mixing up AGL and MSL.
Okay, break that down. Above ground level versus mean sea level.
Right. So on the chart, a tower's height is listed in MSL, its height above the sea, but your flight limit is 400 feet AGL above the ground you're standing on.
I can see how that gets confusing fast.
The test will give you a scenario. A tower is 1,000 feet MSL, and the ground beneath it is 400 feet MSL. The rule says you can fly 400 feet above the tower. If you just add 400 to 1,000, you're wrong. You have to calculate the tower's actual height first.
It's a math problem disguised as a regulation question.
It is. Another big one is the floor of Class E airspace.
The faded magenta lines.
You've been studying? Yes, the faded magenta line on the chart means Class E starts at 700 feet off the ground. A faded blue line means it starts at 1,200 feet. People mix those up constantly.
And one wrong color means you're in the wrong airspace.
And you get the question wrong. The last trap is just reading too fast.
The not questions.
The not questions.
Yeah.
Which of the following is not a requirement for night flight? Your brain is tired, you're nervous, and you skip right over the word not. You see the first correct requirement, you click it, and you move on. You have to slow down.
That's a great tip. Now, you mentioned something earlier, a cheat code.
I did. It's the biggest tip I can give anyone. It's not cheating, it's just using your resources.
Okay, I'm listening.
That testing supplement book they give you. In the front of it, there is a legend.
A legend for all the map symbols.
For everything. If you see a symbol for a parachute jump area and you panic because you didn't memorize it, you don't have to. You can flip to the front of the book and look it up right there during the test.
That alone should lower a lot of people's blood pressure.
It really should.
Now, I want to push back on the why. If I'm just a real estate photographer, why do I really need to know about military training routes? It feels so abstract.
It feels abstract until an F-18 screams past your drone at 400 knots.
Okay, fair point.
Here's a real scenario. You're inspecting a roof. You're in what you think is safe, uncontrolled airspace. But you didn't see the thin gray line on your chart labeled VR 1007. That's a military training route.
What does that mean in practical terms?
It means military jets can legally be flying through there at 500 feet off the ground, moving incredibly fast. If you're at 300 feet and you don't know to look for them, it's a disaster waiting to happen. Checking the chart is about situational awareness.
It's about sharing the sky.
It's all about sharing the sky. Same with the weather rules.
Give me the foggy morning scenario.
Okay, it's 7 a.m. It's misty. The rule says 3 miles of visibility. You look out, you can't see the water tower 3 miles away. You can't fly.
And the reason is?
A medical helicopter might be flying low to get a patient to the hospital. In that mist, they will never see you. You are protecting them by staying on the ground.
That really puts it in perspective. So, okay, someone's listening to this. They're convinced. They want to do it. How long does this actually take?
Not as long as you think. This myth that you need hundreds of hours or an aviation background is just false. For most people starting from scratch, we see a realistic range of 2 to 6 weeks.
2 to 6 weeks, that's it.
That's it. And that's based on about 5 to 8 focused hours of study per week.
So an hour a day.
An hour a day. It's not a full-time job. Consistency is what matters.
How would you break that down?
I'd say week 1 is your foundation. You hit regulations and you hit airspace and you spend extra time on the airspace charts. Don't move on until you get it. Week 2, you refine with weather, operations, and loading. And then you start hitting practice tests. Hard.
So consistency over cramming.
Every single time. An hour a day for 2 weeks is so much better than an 8-hour cram session the night before. Your brain needs time to build those connections.
How do you know when you're ready? When do you actually schedule the exam?
There's a benchmark. Do not schedule that test until you are consistently scoring between 80 and 85% on good practice exams.
But the passing score is 70. Why aim so much higher?
It's your buffer for nerves. When you're in that quiet room with the clock ticking, your score is going to drop a few points. You want that cushion so you can pass comfortably.
It's not just about recognizing the right answer, is it?
No, that's the key. You're ready when you can explain why an answer is correct. If you get a question right, ask yourself, could I explain this concept to someone who knows nothing about it? If the answer is yes, you're ready.
You feel that confidence decoding a METAR or looking at a chart.
Right. It goes from being a guess to being knowledge. You just know.
I think the big takeaway here is that this is not some impossible mountain to climb.
It's not. It's a structured, it's a predictable, and it's a very passable exam. You just need a strategy. This test is a badge of honor. It really separates the professionals from, the kids with toys.
And when you have that certificate, you're telling your clients that you operate legally and, more importantly, safely.
Absolutely.
Now, you could try to piece this all together yourself. Go on YouTube, find some videos from 4 years ago, and just hope the rules haven't changed.
You could, but that's a gamble. And we've just discussed how much the rules have changed with night ops and remote ID. Old info is dangerous.
So if someone wants the structured path, how does Red Raven help?
Well, this is exactly why we built our Part 107 online course. It's designed to be that clear roadmap.
And it's updated for 2026.
Completely. It covers everything we've talked about. Remote ID, the new night rules, all of it. We have a structured study path, an AI tutor that can answer your questions, and even audio learning options so you can study on your commute.
And there's a guarantee.
We do have a pass guarantee. If you go through our course and for some reason don't pass the exam, we refund the course fee. We're that confident in the structure, it just removes the guesswork.
It's an investment in your career.
That's what it is. It saves you time, frustration, and it gets you in the air earning money legally and safely.
Well, I think that covers it. We've demystified the exam, we've covered the new rules, and we've laid out a strategy. For everyone listening, don't let this be the thing that holds you back.
That's right. Take it one piece at a time, master the charts, respect the weather, and you will be fine.
Thanks for listening to the Red Raven UAS podcast. Visit redravenuas.com for consulting, training, and FAA Part 107 certification, and check out the current special pricing on our Part 107 course.